Now, in my business, it's very often that we use the very cliched introduction saying, you know, our guest today needs no introduction, but literally today I can use that because it doesn't at all deviate from describing the individual who is here with me, Mr. Anand Mahindra. You don't need an introduction.
Thank you, Sid.
Thank you for your time today. And I have to add here for our viewers that amongst all the things that are sort of said about you and that people know of you, I can endorse the fact that you're also a man of your word, because we are doing this slightly sort of delayed interview. It was supposed to have happened a few days ago, but you kept your promise.
I think that if you don't keep your promises, then nobody comes back to talk to you anyway.
Well, in your case, I'm not sure that's true, but you know, let's go with that. I am certainly happy because, of course, the context was the Formula E race in New York, which is when we last met, and we then couldn't do this interview. Formula E, New York City, Brooklyn, none of the things that we would have ever imagined we would be talking about with you know, somebody who is at the helm of an Indian company. I mean, Formula E in itself was something nobody had imagined a few years ago, but that sort of describes how different things are for you as a group, isn't it, today?
You're right, Siddharth, that I have to pinch myself sometimes. Is it real? And you were with me in Brooklyn, as you rightly said, is unfortunately, this interview didn't take place at that time, but it was a wonderful moment, because on the final day, when unfortunately none of you were there, the Mahindra racing team came to second and third on the podium.
Yeah.
And I was standing in front of that podium looking up, and my daughter was next to me, and she was beaming with the pride that was on my face as well, that you had an Indian company out there in a race that was displaying cutting-edge technology in the automotive world. So yes, I do pause very often to take pleasure in the fact of how far we've come.
So unlike Formula One, then, the millions spent here are sort of worth billions later, you think? Or is that...
I think we're good. We will never lose our frugal Indian Baniya mentality that, yes, the money we spend there in Formula E is not about vanity. It's not about rubbing shoulders with celebrities, who are, of course, turning up in spades as well. But it's really about work. That was just another day at the office.
The fact that you are also now not only, of course, one of the sort of credible teams, you know, fighting for wins in every race, but you've now seen over the last year, especially over the last season, announcements from all the major, you know, global automotive brands saying, yes, we are perhaps abandoning another racing format and then stepping into Formula E. Like Le Mans is gone for some, Formula One is gone for some, but they're all coming to Formula E. And you become almost like a, you know, sort of one of the old, seasoned veterans there. That's a switch.
Absolutely. Yeah, I like that description. We are grizzled veterans of Formula E. It was a punt when we went into it, and it was such a shot in the dark. Not just because Formula E racing was a new category, but yes, we took a risk because we didn't know whether it would work. And to be very honest, there were moments when you know, there were financial strains on the promoter of this format. So we didn't know whether he would come out of this and survive, but he did, as you know, and he's got major investors on board. So things pretty much look set right now, and I think as time goes by, this format is just going to grow.
Speaking of the management, I remember a few months ago and asking if they'll consider an India race, and thanks to Mahindra's involvement, that is now looking like it could be a possibility. You know, I know it's sometimes forgotten, of course, that you mentioned Chetan and how he was a sort of a pioneer when it came to electric mobility here in India. And by extension now, Mahindra has the same status because, you know, you're the only ones who took it seriously enough to get involved. You've got products in the market. We had information yesterday about how you've done 50 million kilometers, if I'm getting that right.
That's right.
Of those cars running around on the roads. What does that do for you in an environment where now suddenly from being the sort of intended future business, it's suddenly become, oh my God, we need to be here now, today, and everybody's attention is turning towards e-mobility. What does it give you an advantage, or are you worried? How does it play out?
I would love to think it gives us an advantage, but we are not going to go into it with that mindset. The landscape is changing so dramatically that just being in pole position doesn't win you a race. Maybe I'll use the metaphor since we started with Formula E racing, and you know that, that many people who started out in pole position somewhere along the race hit the wall and just end up at the back of the track. So that is the perfect metaphor for where we are. We have an advantage. We have clear sight of the road ahead. We do have many things that we can take advantage of, like data. What 50 million kilometers means is not just mileage. It's about data. It's about knowledge. It's
and
about
in Indian conditions.
And in Indian conditions, which nobody else has. The question is, are we going to mine that data in the proper manner? Are we going to exploit that advantage? Are we going to step on the pedal and really zoom ahead at this point? It's really up to us to decide whether that pole position ends up in a podium position or not.
But Anand, staying with the metaphor then, and this is something we spoke about in New York, you know, the fact that Mahindra Racing is on the podium this season, but now you're going to have BMW, Audi, everybody coming in. Do you get to stay at that position? It's the same thing with the market. Now, I'm assuming that you were glad to hear the government come out and talk about a proper deadline, saying by 2030, let's transition to electric. A lot of people have rolled their eyes at that, but the fact that we at least now have a direction or a certain vision, coming back to this whole advantage thing, how do you keep that advantage then? How do you, because everybody will have to do it, one way or the other.
It's a fascinating question, and a question nobody has an answer to. Everyone is right now floundering in a completely new landscape. But before I get back to that question of yours, let me just comment on this aspiration that has been articulated by the government for 2030 that you referred to. I know that aspiration has been trashed or mocked recently by some major heavyweights in the auto industry as being unrealistic and that it won't happen. My response to that is that, you know, for too many years, we as a country have suffered from a poverty of aspirations, not just a poverty of income. I remember when this government was elected and I was in New York and I was doing an interview there, and somebody said, "Don't you think your new leader is promising too much?" And I said, you know, it's time somebody promised too much, because we've had no promises being made at all. So to my mind, is 2030 a reality? Who knows? There's that wonderful picture that's now a cliche about New York in 1901, where you could only see horses on the street, and then by 1914, all you could see were cars and only one horse carriage. The horse carriage industry was a substantial industry. People think of it as horses. It was nothing. It was a huge ecosystem involving mules, stable boys, whips, tracks, carriage makers. All of that was part of an ecosystem, and it vanished in 10 years. So if we look at that, this is not the first time in history that we could see a landscape that will change that dramatically. So what do we have to do, to come back to your question, to stay ahead? We have to just keep paddling faster and faster. We have to not presume that we have an advantage. And we have to invest in a way that you would invest if you were starting out, you know, with scratch. And that's what we're going to do. That's the mentality that we're going to bring to this. We are just starting from a clean sheet, and we are saying, what is this new landscape going to take? And we're going to invest to make sure that when pictures are taken of the future landscape, a lot of the cars in that picture will be Mahindras.
I should take a picture of downtown, somewhere downtown Mumbai right now, I think, and
maybe we should do that, you're right.
And keep that sort of ready for maybe just 3 or 4 years from now. The point, though, here is that while it was nice to hear Minister GADKARI the other day say, look, we're also going to, we've got a plan for charging stations, and because the first question is always, hey, where's the infrastructure and what are you doing about it? So again, let's assume that some of that at least happens. But coming back to your side of things, one of the big challenges has always, for this industry, has been the cost of batteries. Good news in a sense to hear someone of the might of Maruti Suzuki coming in with that joint venture, saying they're going to make batteries locally. What are you going to have to do to sort of, because with that comes economies of scale and hopefully the prices of those batteries going down. I mean, would you be open to source from them? They're willing to sell, I'm told, to other OEMs, or would you look to set up your own battery plant?
Let me be very clear. From where I sit today, I can say very confidently, we are not going to set up our own battery plant. And let me tell you a story.
It's a huge cost.
Yeah, well, let me tell you a story from another business of ours. And that's a company called Mahindra Sustain, which is in the solar business. Why have we been successful? Why has solar power taken off so dramatically, it's because Chinese suppliers of the modules and cells have been beating themselves to death and just lowering the price on the way down. I don't want to join that race. First of all, they're the ones contending with the technology. They're the ones fighting very hard and making very little money while doing so. So I would rather sit on a hill, watch that battle take place, and then ask the suppliers to provide us the lowest cost. To be very honest, Elon Musk's announcement of his battery plant, which is some time away still, has already caused a frenzy of competition amongst those who are currently supplying batteries. And I can tell you very quickly, without telling you the price or the supplier, that we have managed to reduce the forward cost of our batteries, let's say 2 years from now, by a dramatic amount. I can't tell you the amount, but just that experience has told us two things. One, that the tipping point for the shift to electric mobility is much closer than people imagined, because battery costs are coming down faster than they had previously imagined. And the second thing we learned out of that is we don't want to be on the other side of the table, who are having to give these prices to people. So I'd be very happy for Suzuki to make the plant. We would be very happy to buy from them. I'm sure they're going to have to sell to everybody if they want a scale plant. But we would be very happy to watch that battle from afar and get very good prices out of that.
It would be locally sourced, though. You'd have to have, I mean, it doesn't have to be Suzuki, but what I mean to say is it would be somebody making them in India for that to be viable.
I don't know. I don't know what the economics are. If somebody gets up in America, another Elon Musk, and invents a technology that is so superior and is only available in the US, we'll buy from there too.
And of course is in manageable costs.
Yeah.
The government might also be looking at policies specific to this, in the sense where we keep hearing all the right sort of noises, but we keep asking them, look, where are the incentives? Why aren't you incentivizing, electric or in the past hybrid cars more aggressively? Do you think that will happen? Do you think we will now see, because they have set the target, so to speak?
My understanding is that they do not want to follow the Chinese model, where virtually half the cost of the car was subsidized. That's one approach. I'm not saying one or the other approach was better, but the Chinese model is the Chinese model. It's been the model for most of their businesses, which are centrally driven and directed. That's not what this government in India has ever done. I mean, post-liberalization, that is. So given that, I don't blame this government if they say that they want to encourage this industry in different ways rather than subsidies. Because they're right, that in the long run, if you want the right players to remain in the landscape here, the eventual winners, the fittest to survive, in other words, then you shouldn't have a landscape of too much subsidy. Because subsidy distorts competition, distorts the realities of market pricing. And hence it's much better to leave the landscape to decide who are the people who are going to be left standing. So I understand that. But what we tell them is, look, there's a period of transition. You want to keep your transition shorter, by all means, but certainly there is a need to kickstart the process. And I think that what they've been contemplating does involve that. And for example, I think we've been telling the government for some time that one of the best ways in which you can kickstart this industry is by forcing government departments to switch to electric. We still have a massive government, lots of employment there. Why not make every government employee buy an electric car, and then you've kick-started it in a different way and in a much more cost-effective way than subsidies?
Yeah, that's a good point, and I know that you've said that out before, and we've actually been asking some of the ministers the same question. One of the things that now, of course, worries people looking at China are the cracks that have started to appear. In the Indian context, given all of this that, again, going back to your point about how there are a lot of promises, yes, the word on the street is that we'll probably have continuity of government, but, never say never. Are you worried that this kind of a policy, now that it's announced, we'll see it through or not?
There's no going back. There's no going back.
Regardless of who's at the helm.
Let's go back to that picture of New York and the horse carriages. Let us say in 1910 or 1908, some American senator stood up and said, I'm afraid this is jeopardizing the horse carriage industry and we are not going to allow cars to be produced and to go ahead. What do you think would have happened? The image I have in my mind is of somebody saying that and then a tsunami just hitting that politician and that politician vanishing in the waves. That's what's going to happen. This is a wave. This is a tsunami. This is going to happen. So I don't see any government going against this wave.